Welcome back to the Carbon Exposure Project, where we explore the people, policies, and pathways shaping global carbon markets. Today's episode features Daniel Lee. Daniel began his career at Shell, where he helped build out emissions trading operations across Singapore and Australia during the formative years of global carbon markets. He later played a key role at Climate Impact X, a Singapore-based carbon exchange and marketplace, working at the forefront of market innovation and integrity. Now he's channeling his experience into academia, leading the Carbon Market Academy at Nanyang Technology University to train the next generation of carbon market professionals. In this conversation, we cover the full arc of Daniel's career and delve into his transition from trading to teaching, and importantly, why building talent pipelines matters more than ever. Daniel brings a rare mix of market depth, policy perspective, and educational vision. This is one of those conversations that reframes how we think about talent, systems, and the future of carbon markets. Welcome to the Carbon Exposure Project. Daniel, it's a pleasure to see you again. We're here at Spectre Bar. It's a brand new venue for us for season 3. So thank you for being our first guest for season 3.
Thank you. Thank you, and Rene, for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm really excited for our conversation. As you know, we've been discussing this off camera.
Yeah.
I think the work that you're doing is really necessary, and I'm super passionate and glad to be playing a small part in the program. Let's just defer that until that judgment until afterwards. But we talked about I want to talk about the importance of education, and what you're doing now is really fascinating. But let's begin, if we can, just to get a little bit of background about who you are. If you wouldn't mind, just give us some context.
Yeah, no problem.
And how you've arrived at carbon markets, because I think people are always fascinated to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I was just reflecting on that coming in today as well. So first of all, thanks, Rene, for having me on the show. It's
my pleasure.
A really great opportunity. I think how I came to carbon markets, a little bit of a journey, I guess.
It's never a straight line.
Never a straight line, never a straight line. I started in carbon markets in 2009.
Okay.
So that I was in Shell at the time, and Shell asked me to set up the emissions trading desk in Singapore.
Yeah.
And within the company, there was no capability for carbon trading in the East at the time. So
this is very early on in the market.
Very early on, at least for Asia, I would say.
Very much so.
And so they posted me to London to learn from the team there, which had been trading the EU ETS.
Yep.
So I went there, learned from them, came back, set up the trading desk in Singapore, ran that for a few years. So that trading desk was focused on trading in the Australian and New Zealand compliance markets. Now, Australia kind of fell away, but New Zealand really went across. And so we were managing that from Singapore.
Yeah, well, at that time was interesting, right? Because like you said, the Australian market was ramping up. You had the carbon price reduction scheme, CPRS at the time, under the Rudd government in 2007 coming in. You had CERs, all of the stuff becoming regulated, financial services licenses, the whole thing. And then a big thud essentially fell over.
Yeah, that's right. And you had this situation where, carbon markets are, at least compliance markets are, kind of a man-made creation in a way. So, depending on the politics, in Australia in particular, you could see markets were coming on, coming off, coming on, coming off. So just the nature of the time.
I think we had 5 prime ministers in Australia in the span of, I don't know how many years. It was a rotating door. It was pretty incredible.
Indeed.
From a policy perspective, it was a very interesting time.
Indeed.
I left, just anecdotally, I left Australia in kind of frustration, also in search of new greener pastures. In 2012, just put up my hand and said, I can't do it anymore. And so my wife and I pivoted and we went to New York.
Fair enough.
So
I mean, well, that's quite a hop, really.
Yeah, quite a hop.
Yeah. But I think, that's right. And a lot of people sort of, I think were, I would say, frustrated perhaps with the lack of progress at that point in time. But as things turned out, ran that desk for a couple of years, and then kind of left and did a little bit other things.
Yep.
I came back not in the compliance market, but in the voluntary carbon market about 2017, 2018 or so, not as a trader, but as a project developer, still with Shell. And there I was tasked to sort of explore opportunities in Southeast Asia for the development of forest conservation, forest restoration, carbon projects in Southeast Asia. And that part of work, engaging local stakeholders, local governments, especially NGOs, really trying to identify and mature opportunities in that space. So pretty interesting work. Then I left Shell in 2021 to join Climate Impact X as part of the management team there. And it was exciting because there was an opportunity to build something from the ground up.
Yeah, fantastic.
And in that role, sort of shifting gears from dealing with NGOs, governments, communities to corporates, financial institutions, traders. So more market-facing role, as it will.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, a lot of excitement in the voluntary carbon market as well, right?
It was a great time.
Yeah. So fantastic conversations, a lot of companies coming in to explore what they could do. I mean, you were really in the thick of it at that time.
Yeah, but like, no, that was like the ascension, right? And I remember, because obviously I was on the other side, obviously at Expansive, right? But seeing and
who's this Rene guy?
No, but I talked to Mikkel when CIX was initially launched, and basically welcomed him to the playground. Like we need competition, we need innovation for exchanges, and it was really great to see Singapore having its own platform and exchange coming to market. So it's great. And so, like you said, a lot of positive engagement with client-facing. Institutions, you said trading houses,
banks, I mean, and a lot of players, I think also, at least in Asia, a lot of companies were also trying to understand what is this about, you know, and trying to sort of navigate their way through it. A lot of good work. So I think I was really happy with some of the auctions that I kind of led. So for example, we ran a blue carbon auction. I think still probably one of the largest ever held. It was Delta Blue Carbon. 250,000 tons, oversubscribed, fantastic outcome, I think there. So very pleased with that work. But then in 2024, I sort of switched gears again and now moved to Nanyang Technological University, where I am Associate Professor of Practice at the Nanyang Business School. I focus on two areas now. One is climate risk, which is adjacent to carbon markets, but not in carbon markets. And then, of course, carbon markets as well. So that's my background.
So that's the background. So again, not a direct line, but it's fantastic because it shows a sense of curiosity, but also you're adapting to the playing field that's ahead of you. Interesting. So what can I ask you? What was the I guess the impetus for you to leave, let's say, industry? You spent a long time at Shell, and then you're working at Climate Impact X. Sorry, and there's a lot of but CIX. And you now into the education in terms of academia. So what was the driver for you to enter into academia?
It's a good question. I think two layers to that answer, I guess. First, I would say the pathway from industry to academia is not a new one.
No.
You wouldn't say like a majority of people do it, but there's a sizable amount of people that actually do that. And they find it fulfilling, they want to give back. They like to explore different areas, and the same with me. So I find it very fulfilling at this stage of my career to sort of move into academia, give back, but also there is an opportunity here to really, I think, explore into very varied topics, broad topics that you cannot really do if you are sort of within a commercial industry platform, right? Because as
you've got a very narrow aperture.
Very narrow, because logically, right, if you are a proprietary trader, which I was, then your role is very focused. Or if you're a project developer, again, focus on your skill sets and your area of operations. Whereas in academia, your task is to, be abreast of the latest developments, research, investigate topics, and of course then transmit that and relay that to your participants, your students, essentially. And I find that quite enjoyable.
I bet.
There was actually also a remark that some of my ex-colleagues told me, and I kind of forgot I did that, which was when I was in Shell, I did have some adjunct teaching roles as well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So
you always had this itch.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And I just kind of forgot it because, as it was, you're sort of focused on doing deals, transactions. But they would tap onto me occasionally, and of course others as well, to either lead and design programs or teach on certain courses within the company. It's a very large company.
Yeah, sure.
And so I forgot I did that, but I really did enjoy it. And so just drawing upon some of those experiences.
So those experiences.
As well. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. I mean, I can totally align and kind of sympathize with that wanting to give back. I think that's where we connected, right? In terms of our conversation. I want to unpack that. So, okay, so you've made this meandering path and now it leads you to where you are right now at NTU. And you just talked about the climate resiliency piece and now carbon. Can we dive into carbon? What is the work that you're doing? Because I really want to use this platform to really showcase it as a call to action to a lot of people that are watching this show.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. So at the Nanyang Business School, part of NTU, we recently launched together in Singapore with our government agency partners, Enterprise Singapore and the Singapore Economic Development Board. It was really recently announced that we launched this Carbon Markets Academy of Singapore. And together with our partners, essentially, the focus is to establish an academy that's quite focused on serving the needs of the carbon services and trading sector in Singapore and hopefully the region as well. And the origins of this idea was, where Singapore is trying to promote itself as a hub for carbon services and trading, which is logical. And we have a lot of companies coming in, a lot of talent coming in. But as part of the initiative, it was also felt that, hey, we should also grow our own timber, to supplement the needs of these companies, to grow, to make sure that the growth is not throttled, et cetera, et cetera. And so this academy is focused specifically for this sector. And so quite excited about the work. We have a new course, our flagship program. It's a 9-day executive certificate in carbon markets, and you're part of that course. Really, I'm
very grateful to be part of it.
We're excited about that. So the academy is focused on the sector, rolling out new courses, trying to train working professionals or postgraduate or even undergraduate to enter the sector. Is the nutshell of the work that we're trying to do.
And I love that. I want to firstly commend you guys on the work that you've done in preparation to get to this point. That announcement is really exciting, and now obviously the work begins. So first intake is in January of 2025.
That's right.
So that's exciting. And then have you thought further on afield in terms of the next level of intakes?
Yeah. So we have the first intake in January. It's 9 days, it's 3 days per month, because we kind of wanted to give it a break. So 3 days in January, 3 days in February, and the 3 days in March. So that's the first intake. Then we have a second intake starting in April, and great for you to participate on that as well.
You just sign me up. I'm there. To the point about the giving back bit, and you use the phrase growing your own timber. It's so essential. Yes. So okay, I want to take you back, right, to a time when you were at CIX. So the war for talent was ludicrous in 2021.
Crazy.
Anybody that had carbon anywhere near their resume was commanding these huge premiums in the talent market. Headhunters were abound, and essentially they were just pillaring trading desks all over the place.
That's right.
Your old, let's call it alma mater at Shell, had numerous poaching raids, let's call it. Other shops, BP, etc. Were also sort of schools of kind of talent generation. And then many of those people then went on to different trading desks, banks, etc. And that was the first crop. But that's not a sustainable model. You can't continuously play musical chairs and take these people that have got 2, 3, 4, 10 years of experience, whatever, and then just kind of raid them and then plug them in. They then need to have teams to grow as well.
Exactly.
And if you don't build that organically, it's not a sustainable model. And you know full well that being within an institution, whether that's a large institution like Shell or let's say a tech, climate tech kind of player like CIX, it's hard and it takes a long time to kind of build out the talent organically within the organization. So having an academy whose single purpose is to equip the talent coming through, like you said, post-grad, people that are looking for a career transition, and potentially undergraduates coming through to taking this course, effectively creates an output of talent that already has an underlying foundation that's really solid. And I think that we can build upon in terms of that growing the timber or using a strong foundation analogy. I think it's super important. And what I hope is that not only we can have the first and second intakes, but we have this continuous rolling intakes and then off takes effectively, where industry lines up to effectively offtake that talent that comes through in that pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Rene. Thanks for that. And maybe a couple of points just to
please elaborate.
To add on to that, right? So I think on one level, indeed, this first course, this 9-day course, was designed actually through a lot of consultation with industry as well as with government. And it's positioned as a foundational, broad-based course, but absolutely it's the intent of the academy to roll out new courses that sort of maybe perhaps at the intermediate level, maybe shorter and more focused, but targeted based on what industry needs to kind of build upon the foundation and supplement it as we go. Because what I noticed as well, Rene, is there's, I think, a third layer of participants trying to sort of getting involved in the market. Let me explain myself.
Please.
So you got the first base layer, which the classic modality which people understand, which is people trying to enter into the sector, right? Because strong core beliefs in sustainability, carbon markets, clearly a logical way to get in. So these are people trying to enter the sector. So you got that, and these courses do cater for that. Then you've got people, I think, within the existing industry. And, as you say, they're 3-4 years, maybe some 10, but they may be experts in one section of the value chain.
Completely.
And carbon services and trading sector is fairly
really
broad, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different fields of interest, a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
And so what the academy is also interested in doing is sort of providing the opportunity for existing professionals to kind of round out their knowledge in other areas. If you are a seasoned project developer, well and good, but maybe you don't have as much experience on the corporate side. How do they do baseline setting? How do they set corporate targets?
Completely. It's a different landscape.
Different, right? And it's good for you to know. So sort of that's the second, I think, target group. I think what I'm hearing as well when I speak to industry participants is that in some large organizations, and this is especially true as I think we enter a phase where carbon markets is sort of the stakeholder set that's involved in carbon markets just keeps getting broader and broader. So, for example, a lot of the carbon market activity now, it's getting enmeshed, I think, in a good way with finance, climate finance, for example. So, just after Baku, we saw, the goals around climate finance. So we have a lot of established finance professionals, for example, their day job is not carbon markets, but certainly risk control, for example, in terms of or underwriting or working in fixed income, or blended finance. And they want to understand enough of the carbon markets so that they can continue to do the day job, but also sort of flex their own, ability to deal in different products or support different initiatives.
Which is super critical.
Right, because you can't have, I think, even in the sizable shop, to have so many 100% dedicated carbon market professionals. I mean, you hope you will get there, but now
many of them can't underwrite that in terms of costs.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that third layer are people who have existing day jobs who do other markets, but really want to build upon that knowledge in the carbon markets to sort of flex their ability to do different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the academy hopes to cater to as well.
I think that's fantastic, because taking on from that, obviously those individuals then widen their horizons, they expand their kind of aperture, let's say. But now the industry benefits as well, because you have cross-pollination of different ideas. So you have people with 20 years of experience of a fixed income experience,
That's
right? Who now bring a different experience set and understanding of risk and of basically really enormous markets to this market. And so that cross-pollination of ideas is really helpful, because otherwise we end up being in little silos. Like you said, you have the project developer silo, you've got your trading silo, and then you've got the corporate silos. It doesn't really beget sort of growth, right? So this way you actually get a participation that's much broader.
You can put in some best practices as well,
of course,
from some of these adjacent sectors.
Okay. Great. So I'm super excited. So can you give us some context around numbers? So in terms of the intakes, what are the ambitions in terms of the first and second intakes that you've announced so far?
Well, no, definitely. So I would say the intakes are kind of governed by sort of a combination of, what is a good size in terms of ensuring there's enough interaction between the participants, and also you don't want it so large that the participants don't feel like they can have an interaction with the professor or with the industry trainer. So we've kind of settled on intake size about 55, 50 as a maximum, as it were. And we're actually quite full on the first intake, and that's kind
Not
of
surprising at all.
why we opened the second intake, which is filling fast, by the way.
I bet.
So we're quite, I think, encouraged, humbled as well by the positive response, which kind of says, well, then we definitely need to focus on making sure we meet the expectations of the participants.
I have no doubt that you'll be able to do that. the pre-planning that you've put in terms of the course materials and preparation with industrial partners is fantastic.
I was going to say with you on board as well.
Mate, don't oversell it. Always under promise and then over deliver. That's the model. But no, that's fantastic.
But those are the kind of numbers, and we hope to run obviously several intakes each year. And as I said, we do want to roll out more courses for working professionals. This is not even including some of the postgraduate and undergraduate work we're doing. So within the university, there are multiple postgraduate programs. So we will continue to work to enhance that offering through carbon markets academy courses sections within those programs. So we'll do that.
So this is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning. Lots of stuff to do. And I would sort of take the opportunity to add that there is not an insignificant part of the academy's mandate, which is to try and elucidate best practice from industry, sort of like bring it out in a case study or a white paper, so that the whole industry benefits. And as mentioned earlier, happy to work with yourselves, work with other partners to kind of bring out those best practices so that the whole sector really benefits. That's the other part of our work.
But that's great, because it also it's changing with the times.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So now in terms of, you got 55 in intake 1 and presumably similar sort of numbers in intake 2. So let's just say you've got 100 now folks that are coming through in the pipeline that are now then available in terms of talent. So that creates a supply from on the talent side. I think it's really interestingly timed as well into 2025 as we're approaching now 2030. I think that realization is really hitting a lot of corporates in particular, where they've made these goals in 2020 far out, a decade, 2030. We're already at halfway point, and now these goals start becoming really material and realizing, oh, how are we tracking? Not so great. 2040 goals, which are even further ahead, definitely not so great. So you need to have the professionals now in the industry, both at the industry, at the corporate level, that are actually doing the decarbonisation efforts, and the folks that are supporting them in the broader ecosystem on the carbon side for financing, project development, the trading, the infrastructure development, everything to be set up and ready for when the market really starts to roar again. So I think the timing is it's quite prophetic. I think I certainly am speaking, it's anecdotal, but we're seeing a pickup certainly in 2024 based on what 23 was. I think everyone agrees that 2023 was not the best of all time in terms of vintages. Certainly not compared to its predecessors in 21 and to a certain extent 22. Even though the kind of the market started to come off, it wasn't as bad as 23. 23 was really a year of reflection, and now as we exit 24, I think the bottom is truly behind us, and there's continuous potential for growth, and that's fantastic that we're going to actually have a cadre of new young folks that are available and entering the workforce. So that's really exciting.
Well, that's good to hear from you as well, Rene, because you're really plugged into the
well, my traders are really plugged in. I'm less so. I feel like
your management.
You know what it's like exactly. When you're on the trading desk, you're really sharp. You're out there every day clanging your swords, and then you get off the desk, and now you're in management meetings and a whole bunch of stuff.
Show me the dashboard.
Yeah. It's really frustrating for an old trader to admit, but it's the reality. But we age out, and that's where I'm at.
Well, give back, Rene.
Well, that's where I'm at.
Indeed,
that's the whole cycle, right? Yeah.
Indeed. I think the additional layer to just add on that is, if you think about where the carbon market is right now, I think we are in, I think some people call it the third generation, or third version. But in any case, I think where we are now is we see the rise again of international carbon markets with Article 6 and all that after the Kyoto Protocol mechanism kind of faded.
We've had 10 years of patient waiting since Paris Agreement was signed.
Exactly. So we've got that, which is a really exciting development. And I think what you just outlined a few minutes ago is really where in the voluntary carbon market we have this painful transformation, as it were, right? There's sort of ups and downs, but certainly I would say a painful transformation for the better in terms of increasing integrity and all
growing
that.
pains.
Correct. But that's, I think, where continuous education, continuous improvement really can play a supporting role to people like yourselves, to the sector, because even for someone, I think, who has been maybe 10 years to sort of in the carbon markets, it's you learn on the job. You're reading. You're sort of trying to keep yourself posted. And in some cases, you're actually the thought leader shaping the changes. But I think continuous education allows for that continuous improvement, where you say, well, maybe I need to take a time out, a few days, go back to university, as it were, to brush up, maybe just interact with others and sort of just level up again, in that way, keep myself updated. So I think that's where...
relevant.
Yeah,
right? No, I think that is the definition of humility there, absolutely. To just realize that, maybe you could be a thought leader in this space, whatever, but you're never too old to learn, right? And you never stop learning.
Correct.
So just opening out your ears and just shutting your mouth and listening and learning from other people is so essential, right? And it's a hard lesson to learn, but it's a really important one.
Yeah. And sometimes you just need to force yourself to take time away from your desk.
Yes.
Because you're so busy,
just
right?
Have the clarity.
Incessant.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like your phone keeps ringing, Renee.
I know.
I know.
Like, I had to put on airplane mode so we could shoot with it.
Exactly. But yeah, sometimes it's just like I just need 3 days away from my desk. I need to just immerse myself again in a learning environment.
I mean, as a dad, I'm loving this. 3 days of silence, that's a luxury retreat right there.
Well, don't say that's the real reason, really. But that's, I mean, I think that's value enhancing value.
No, completely agree. And I think getting that clarity and being able to have that cross-pollination is what's fantastic. I mean, a lot of the time in terms of professional development, that's why conferences are so important, because they're learning platforms where the folks that are shaping the kind of zeitgeist, right? The thought leaders are there and they're sharing their experiences and they're having these broader conversations. Obviously, it requires a level of subject matter expertise to be able to dive in at that level, which the NTU course provides, so that younger folks can actually now enter the dialogue. But it builds also a network. That's so important, right? And those then conversations that are outside of the lectern or whatever it might be are really important as well to help them to shape the path of a lot of the people. You're building friendships, you're building connections, you're building business, pathways, etc., and also learning and understanding new things. It's oftentimes that I have these meetings with lots of different people in the course of day job, right? And you go, wow, you walk away from that meeting and go, I did not know that thing at all. I had no idea about that. Now, guys, we've got to dive in and research this, which is really great. And in university context, it's a lot more open to teaching in that context.
Correct.
Right?
Because sometimes, very often, the content that is delivered, say, at the start of the session, it can be fodder for conversation.
That's exactly what it is.
And you learn from not just the professor or the industry trainer, but also from the questions that come and the interaction that you get. And certainly, as one of the premier business schools in the region, we want to make sure that the sessions are absolutely interactive, right? So it's not just lecture in the traditional sense.
I guarantee you, my lectures will be exactly that open dialogue. I will not be preaching.
So we want to make it interactive. Absolutely, we have I think a very established track record in terms of program delivery, in terms of working with industry trainers. And we want to make that interactive and a great safe space, I think, is the other one. Because you're all here to learn.
Yes, completely.
You don't feel like, I'm in a conference where I need to, show
I don't
up
want to put my hand up and then ask a dumb question.
Correct.
But often those are the best because they're coming from a completely left field. And you need sometimes to be agitated. But I completely get what you're saying. When I did my master's degree, I really appreciated the fact that it was an open and encouraging, environment that allowed for dialogue and understanding. Some people were further along, more experts on this subject than others, and there was this cross-pollination. You get that in any business school, right? Through any MBA program.
That's right.
You get that cross-pollination. That's what builds the bonds as well, that then can always lead to really good business opportunities.
That's right.
So no, that's exciting. So I'm super excited to be part of this. As you can probably tell, I've said excited about 100 times. And congratulations on setting this up. It's very, very needed. All right, Daniel, with the interest of, the special movie magic, we've reassembled here with a new cocktail.
Clearly.
So in the interest of continuity, I'm going to point that out.
Okay.
But no, we were on a roll there, but I noticed our drinks getting low, or at least mine. So we took
I'm happy
a
with
little
the
break.
drink, yeah.
So we changed it up to this amazing little cocktail. Okay, so I want to dive back in. We were obviously talking about education,
Yes.
and I really want to dive into the importance of education.
Right.
You talked about the course itself and sort of the output component and the talent piece, and we talked about sort of the continuous education component, but education, can you just tell us, in your thoughts, what is the importance of education?
I think, first of all, education is important in all sectors, right? Whatever fields of study that you have. But certainly for, I think, where we are, sort of the carbon services and trading sector, there is it's pretty important, just given where we are right now. And maybe let me illustrate a little bit from that.
Please.
Sort of the way I think about how the market is developed, and as part of that, where the talent sits as it is now. I would say there's an early generation of talent.
Yep.
And this, were folks that were really getting involved in the carbon market, perhaps from the early 2000s to early 2010s, as it were. So sort of in the run-up to the EU ETS in 2005, sort of implementing and really running with the rise of the Kyoto mechanisms, Clean Development Mechanism, JI, and all that. And so there's the old guard, as it were.
Yeah.
And these guys have that long history, sort of lots of difficult times, but also a lot of good times in that period. Some of these participants have left the sector, gone on to do different things, and some have remained. Those that remain, you still see some of them, and these guys are experts. They've risen to positions of leadership.
Yeah.
But they're diminishing number over time. And so as the industry goes, certainly we need to develop that second generation of talent. And indeed we did, right? There's a second generation which perhaps you and I will fall
I'm
into.
definitely part of that. Yep.
Which is sort of, think about 2010s onwards.
Yeah.
Sort of, post-Paris, really strong interest in the voluntary carbon market, and market really just growing massively on sort of the tailwinds of sustainability as well.
Well, there was some, I don't want to gloss over, there was some pretty abhorrent times in between, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Some more stories, but yeah, there's been a lot of upside.
Certainly lots of growth in that period. And yes, as you rightly point out, early 2020s.
Certainly in the voluntary market in the early 2010s was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But compliance markets started to kind of gestate and started to evolve, especially in the EU ETS context. So I completely agree.
Exactly. And I think where we are now is sort of in that third phase where the market is seeing a resurgence of international carbon markets again. So, the whole Article 6, the operationalization, the implementation of that.
Yeah.
That's a new phase, I think, where we are in. Plus, we also see the voluntary carbon market going through that painful transformation, which I kind of mentioned earlier as well. And so now that we are in this phase, I think education plays a strong role in preparing either existing market participants, so the second generation or new generation, to thrive in this phase.
Yeah.
But it also is important for participants looking to enter the sector into this new phase, because each phase, I think, calls for different skill sets.
Completely. And different perspectives and different energy as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think a long-winded story to your answer, where I think education plays a role in this sector.
But I love the way that you framed it in terms of these different, a lot of people say, in the voluntary carbon market, VCM 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, you just explained it from a generational perspective. Like, there are transformations and transitions in terms of the generations. And correct, like, that first wave, the OGs, like the old guard, as you'd like to term it, and I like to term it, they brought so much energy, and they kind of equip the second generation, folks like ourselves, to kind of help to now take it on. But now it's our responsibility to pay it forward, hence the educational component, right, and the giving back. But it's really important to have that new energy and those different perspectives. And also that new generation that's coming in now, they've got a lot more effectively riding on it for them and their future. So now kind of bringing it kind of to that kind of conclusion, let me ask you, like looking at it from our bubble, okay, it's great, but outside of that bubble, that next generation trying to come in, what are their key motivations? Obviously trying to enter the workforce is one, but what are the key drivers for them? Because there's a lot of anxiety with regards to climate, and that ultimately that's the generation that's inheriting the climate catastrophe, as the media kind of tends to term it. But I sense a lot of optimism in a lot of young people that I speak with around how they can contribute and provide effectively solutions to a lot of the problems that we're facing. You're sitting at that nexus in the intake that we referred to. There's a lot of those young people that you're speaking to them within this university context at the business school. Can you give us their perspective?
It is a very good question. I think when we sort of turn our sort of attention to people outside of bubbles, it's quite interesting to hear their thoughts. I think on where they see, how they see climate change, how they see carbon markets within that as well. So maybe beginning first with the undergraduates, sort of the younger people, as you mentioned. I would say that there is still quite a lot of students who may not fully have understood what carbon markets are about.
Yep.
Certainly in Asia, right? It's been around, but not so permeating, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of I've heard about it, I've read about it, sort of headlines in newspapers and all that.
Yeah.
I know climate change is important, and that they're aware. But the sort of the nuances of how the carbon markets work, and obviously they don't. I would say that there are two camps, right? There are those that sort of not really that interested in carbon markets, either because they just focus on other areas.
Sure.
But do understand that climate change is important, but they sort of have to go through that process of, figuring out what are the actions that matter. So is it, for example, not using plastic straws? Okay, that is important, but will that move the needle in terms of addressing climate change? Probably not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's for them, they got to go into that journey of what's more impactful or not. Then I would say there's another camp that is actually pretty curious about what carbon markets can do. And I think the challenge here, not just for myself in education, but really for market participants like yourself, you spoke to me about some of your mentoring work, for example, is really to, I think, work with wider society, as it were, to, especially the younger people, to sort of explain to them, look, the carbon market is going through this transformation, and the voluntary carbon market in particular, because that's the one that grabs the headlines.
Yeah.
But this is an important phase of the market, but the market is still absolutely important. The role of carbon pricing in society and decision making is absolutely critical. And I think it's our responsibility to engage younger folks who are sort of interested, but don't want to be turned off by, say, some of the scandals in the newspapers. So I see the role of education there, working with these younger people, as trying to, give them the full picture, explain to them that we're on a journey towards improvement, but at the same time continue to illustrate concretely the role of carbon pricing, carbon markets in the fight against climate change. So those are the sentiments I would say at the undergraduate level. I think at the working professional level, it's a little bit different.
Okay.
There, I think people, I would say a more mature age, sort of are thinking, especially those who are outside the bubble, sort of thinking sustainability is important. There are jobs to be had there. But they also read a lot more in terms, and so they sometimes come with ideas or perceptions that, hey, the carbon market is fraught with scandal, lots of greenwashing. How do you answer some of these questions? And I think that is often the case. And And I think there again, the task or the onus is how do you engage, how do you explain, what are the issues specifically, and what is the transformation that the sector is trying to sort of go through to sort of address those issues.
Makes sense.
But I think in Singapore in particular, there is still a strong interest in, are there roles? Is this an area that I can sort of invest my energy in within the sort of at the working level, working professional level as well.
Okay. Yeah. But I think that what those two cohorts have in common is a level of curiosity, right? That you've kind of outlined in terms of how they can, in the second cohort, you sort of mold themselves to kind of benefit from this kind of rising tide, let's say. And then the younger generation around again the same thing, but like they're bringing different perspectives and they're bringing different energy and that level of curiosity to challenge the status quo. So I think that that's really, really necessary, and especially in the growth and evolution of all markets, because markets can't stay static. There's always a changing in terms of the paradigm, and we need that input. So that's fantastic.
All right. And one of the things that, if I may, sort of
please
just maybe share an anecdote about a simulation that I ran. So I ran a climate simulation with some of my undergraduate students in my climate risk class, not the carbon markets class, climate risk class. But there we worked with a simplified climate model where you could vary the inputs, subsidies for sort of renewables, heavily tax fossil fuels, for example, investment in certain technologies. So you have all these levers. And if you change the levers in this model, and at the end you can see the impact of each lever or the combination of levers to get to a particular temperature outcome. So you change the levers, you get different outcomes. We ran that simulation, and part of it is obviously a pedagogical tool. But the point or the conclusion from that whole exercise was to demonstrate that, notwithstanding the value of specific levers in and of itself, sort of trying to, provide subsidy for renewables, encourage EV adoption, the one thing that kept coming out from that simulation was the absolute importance in a carbon price. And I don't think people fully appreciate that. And so by doing this exercise with students who are the next generation of leaders, next generation of talent, then I think we are able to underscore the importance of a carbon price, which very often manifests as a carbon tax or a carbon emissions trading scheme, for example, and hence the importance of carbon markets to this fight against climate change. So I thought I'd just share that anecdote because I think that's the role of education, right? Where we try to provide insights that cut through some of the noise that we sometimes hear, as it were.
But that's super important because you get this. So from an academic context, obviously pricing that externality, this pure economics kind of terminology, that folks that are practitioners get because of the day-to-day. But like what you're saying here is actually now there's a diffusion of that knowledge and understanding of in that simulation of the different parameters and the importance of the pricing of that externality, providing that price changes the behavior of an economy effectively.
That's right.
And so that's really, really heartening to see that obviously now there's a generation that's equipped with these kind of fundamental understandings that they can then apply that to their careers. So that's exciting. So do you mind, so thank you for providing that context. I think that was a really fascinating conversation around the importance of education, which complements everything that we've discussed. Can we round home base? So kind of use Americanism here.
Sure.
So obviously NTU and the business school here focusing on this Carbon Academy and the program of these various intakes. We talked about that importance of having that new talent input into the market. But it's within a very much a Singapore context. You mentioned earlier on your government partners, Enterprise Singapore and the Singapore Economic Development Board.
That's right.
Play really critical roles here in terms of stimulating what you termed earlier as this hub. I really want to dive into this context of and concept of the Singaporean Carbon Hub. It's something that I feel really proud to be a part of, albeit playing a small role, but it's a really thriving economy and an industrial hub. It seems that it's at the forefront of the government's thinking around future sort of areas for potential growth. Can you kind of give us some additional context of at least your perspective of where we're at with the Singaporean Carbon Hub and how it's growing?
Yeah, certainly. I think we've come a long way, I think.
But in a very short period of time, might I add.
Indeed.
Because this concept was really only started to begin to be floated in 2019.
Yeah, that's right. And so the government's really pushed forward on that, largely off, I think the, Singapore Green Plan, for example, which is a nationwide plan that we have to sort of get towards our net zero goals, as it were. And it's really, first of all, I would say the mindset's completely shifted, and certainly the number of players in this ecosystem has really grown tremendously, and it's become a lot more vibrant, I would say. So I think they did a couple of surveys in the earlier years looking at the number of firms and all that, but I think there's certainly more than close to 100 firms, I would say, I think in Singapore right now that are kind of like adjacent or quite focused in the carbon markets in particular.
And that's across the entire ecosystem. It's not just the trading.
It's not just the trading
commodity. Yeah,
absolutely. And so, like, if you think about, it could be MRV technology, it could be marketplaces, exchanges, it could be actually proprietary trading houses, but also
fintechs, project developers. A number of folks are being very attracted by Singapore because of this network effect.
That's right. And also you get some of the professional services arm, so either in the sort of accounting, reporting, legal services as well, sort of getting involved in this space. And you see sort of, sort of homegrown legal firms that perhaps didn't previously have a carbon focus. You sort of see their interest in this space, and it's growing because their clients are just asking them, and so they have to kind of respond. Yeah,
and you have supported policy measures as well with this Singaporean carbon tax, helping to underwrite this effectively.
Correct, and that's a good segue into that, because you've got all these companies coming in, obviously, as trying to participate in using Singapore as a hub location for the activities in the region. But the government has also, through various measures, tried to build up coalitions. So you've got the Singapore Carbon Market Alliance, I believe. You've got SFFA, which is another sort of industry work group. You've got Traction, which is focused on transition finance. So there's all these different coalitions, different groups that often overlap, but certainly focused on different segments of the market. The government sort of rolling out incentives, grants for firms. Recently, I think the Economic Development Board rolled out a grant for early stage project development. So that's fascinating.
That's fantastic. Really stimulatory.
So really, I think as a hub, it's doing pretty well. And I think one thing that quite proud of as a Singaporean really is, the government always says, in a sense that never be complacent. Always look at how do we continuously improve. And I think certainly it's playing out in Singapore's sort of goals as trying to be a carbon services and trading hub.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with everything you said. It's really exciting to be part of this ecosystem. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to obviously to work with you and your colleagues at NTU for this intake that's coming up. And thank you for your insights. It was a really fascinating conversation. And let's drink to Singapore.
All right.
Cheers.
Oops. Ooh.
Hold on. That's what the
That's what
said.
the salt
Cheers.
is for.
Cheers.